Hare Krishna. The mind may be a drinker, but the intelligence doesn't have to be a bartender. Bartender is one who serves drinks in a bar. Now, whenever any customer comes along and asks for a drink, the bartender obliges. Within our consciousness, if we consider our consciousness to be like a bar, of course, our consciousness can also be like a temple, but there are within our consciousness also uh, things which are intoxicating, which are inebriating and debilitating eventually. So depending on what our focus is, what are the prominent impressions in our consciousness may well be like a bar, and within that, our mind often dwells on those impressions which are intoxicating, which give a little pleasure. Just like when a person drinks, one goes a little high and then one falls down to a low. So similarly, the mind often goes towards such pleasures which go towards a high, and then there is a big fall after that. Those which taste like poison in the beginning, those which taste like nectar in the beginning, but taste like poison in the end. So now, as Krishna talks about such pleasures in 18.38 in the Bhagavad Gita, that agre amrutopamam pariname vishamiva. Now, the mind is going to be attracted by this initial nectar and is going to go towards it. But we don't have to go along with it. We have our intelligence. And the intelligence doesn't have to be a bartender. As soon as the mind comes up with a desire, okay, I want this, the intelligence doesn't have to run around here and there to try to fulfill the desire of the mind. And unfortunately, that is what today the intelligence is doing. And not just one individual intelligence, but even the collective intelligence. Much of technology is today used to facilitate the fulfilling of people's desires for sense gratification. Of course, technology is used for good purposes also, but for positive, constructive, knowledge enhancing purposes also. But much of the use of technology that is done by people is for seeking more and more efforts for sense gratification, sensual indulgence. So now, and often when people want to indulge in something, so for example, if somebody wants to surf some inappropriate sites on the net, then people may use their intelligence so that they can they may use a proxy server, or they may surf incognito, or they may do whatever things are required so that they can cover their tracks. So here what is happening? The intelligence has become like a bartender for the mind. The mind has a desire to intoxicate itself, and the intelligence runs around using its shrewdness to fulfill the desire of the mind instead of countering the desire of the mind. So now, within the internal hierarchy, Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita 3.42 that the intelligence is higher than the mind, or at least it is meant to be. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya param manah manasastu para buddhe yo buddhe paratastu saha. This 3.42 in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says Indriyani paranyahur, that above the senses is the mind. Indriyani paranyahur, sorry, the senses are above the body. Above the indriyebhya param manah, above the senses are the mind, is the mind. Manasastu para buddhe, above the mind is the intelligence. Your buddhe paratastu saha, and beyond the intelligence is he, the consciousness, the soul. So here essentially Krishna is telling that the intelligence is above the mind, and that means the intelligence is meant to control the mind. However, the intelligence cannot take the position of the control of the mind unless it is also directed by something higher, by someone higher. And that higher reality is the soul. So to the extent we are spiritually conscious, Krishna says next of the Evam Buddhe Param Buddhva Samstabhyatmanam Atmana. Krishna says use your intelligence to realize your transcendence. And thus, when we use our intelligence to realize our transcendence, then we can conquer ignorance. So now, The easiest way to situate ourselves on the spiritual platform is to not just analytically think that I am soul, but to practically act at the level of the soul. And practical action at the level of the soul means that we learn to love and serve Krishna. That because the soul's eternal nature is loving service to Krishna, and to the extent that the soul acts in accordance with that loving nature, to that extent the soul will experience spiritual happiness, and by experiencing spiritual happiness the soul will be able to turn away from the allurements of the mind. So what will happen is the mind may push, but if one is getting spiritual wisdom, one is getting spiritual satisfaction, this comes by studying scripture and practicing bhakti yoga as taught in scripture. By this, the intelligence, when it is energized with higher wisdom and higher taste, then it won't say yes to the mind, rather it will say no to the mind. Rather than being like the bartender, the intelligence will become like a doorkeeper, which will not allow, even if there are some drinks in a house. Sometimes even in a house where people take drinks, they may not allow children to take drinks. So that as a doorkeeper who doesn't allow the children to go into the room where drinks are kept. So like that, the intelligence will not allow the mind to go into those impressions and not indulge in those impressions, and in that way we will be protected. So by studying scripture and by getting higher taste through the practice of bhakti yoga as taught in the scripture, we can transform our intelligence from being a bartender for the mind to for the mind's desire to drink, to a doorkeeper which checks the mind from indulging in its petty desires. Thank you. Hare Krishna.